Long ago, a Persian king was extremely fond of hunting. Every few days, he went out with some of his followers to hunt wild animals. On one of the occasions, when the king was riding out of the city, a woodchopper gathering firewood saw the horsemen and stood on the side of the road to watch them. It so happened that this man was dressed in old, ragged, and dusty clothes. His face was pockmarked and his eyes crooked. All in all, his appearance was ugly and dirty. Nevertheless, he obviously enjoyed watching the king's group. As soon as the group came near him, one of the king's followers shouted at him to get out of the way and not to stare at the king. The king rebuked his followers. Why make him go away? He doesn't cause us any shame by simply looking at us, the king said. Ugliness is a sign of failure, and seeing ugly faces is a bad sign. Also, ugliness disturbs the heart and it can mean trouble. The king's follower said these words as they rode quickly past, breaking the woodchopper's heart. He became a little sad, but since he had a pure and clean heart, he said to himself, I will make this man ashamed, or at least show him up for the liar that he is. The more the woodchopper thought about it, the more innocent he felt. He said to himself, I'm not afraid. I'll go at the time the king returns from his hunting trip, and with a few well chosen words, I'll confront the liar and show him up for what he is. He put on some clean clothes and taking a piece of paper drew on it certain lines, some crooked and some straight. Then he folded it in four and tucked it in his collar of the shirt. A bit later, he walked to the same place where he had been that morning. As the king and his men returned, the woodchopper moved to hand his letter to someone as he stepped out and held it out in front of him. As soon as the horsemen arrived, the king's follower, who was the fortune teller, seeing the woodchopper, took the letter and started to push him away. But the king, who had seen the petition in the man's hands, reined in his horse and told his followers to bring him the petition so that he could see what was in it. The whole party came to a halt. The woodchopper stood right where he was. When he unfolded the paper, the king saw there was nothing written on it, only the lines drawn on it. He questioned his fortune teller. What does he want? It's obvious the woodchopper is crazy, said the fortune teller impatiently. There's nothing written and you cannot understand anything from these lines drawn on the paper. Perhaps he has something in mind, thought the king, so he summoned the woodchopper to his side and asked him what he wanted. Long live the king, replied the woodchopper respectfully. I'm a hard-working man, a woodcutter. I work and I have bread to eat. The reason I wanted to give you this paper was to be able to come close to you so that I could ask a few questions and improve my knowledge. The king looked at his fortune teller, who said quickly that the woodchopper still appeared to him to be crazy. It's easy to accuse someone without good reason, the woodchopper said in a clear voice. But this isn't right. If you hear my questions and if you answer them, it'll be apparent that I'm not crazy. I want my answers from the king and not from others. Am I permitted to ask? Ask anything you want, the king replied. I would like to ask how the hunting went today. Did it go all right? The woodchopper asked. It went very well, replied the king. There was plenty of game, and as I expected, I enjoyed it. Nodding, the woodchopper said, and so you had cause for happiness. And were your followers happy also? All arrangements went well, agreed the king. Have you received any bad news from anywhere by chance? Continued the woodchopper. No, nothing but good news, the king said. And nothing has happened to any of your men? And no accident occurred at the hunting grounds? The woodchopper went on. No, they are all well and happy. Nobody was injured. And so today you suffered no discomfort, no sorrow, and no grief of any kind? No, no grief, and we have been happier today than any other day. Looking quizzically at the woodchopper, the king asked, Why do you mean by all this? I mean this, the woodchopper said clearly, looking at the king's follower. Why did you push me out of your way this morning and not allow me to watch you or even see you? The king's follower was angry and said immediately, You see what a bold and talkative man he is? Is it not true that the ugliness of his appearance is a mirror of his ugliness of his nature? Turning to the woodchopper, he continued, since you are so nosy, let me tell you this. To see ugly people with ugly faces is a bad sign. I wanted you out of the way so that seeing you wouldn't spoil our pleasure. But the woodchopper continued quietly. My last question is this. If seeing anybody would have an effect on somebody else's life, then today your seeing me was a blessing because you all had a good time. But for me to see you was a bad sign. When you pushed me aside in a very unpleasant way, my heart was broken. From this morning until now, I've been feeling sad and offended. Now let me ask you this, sire. Was seeing me worse for you, or me seeing you worse for me? Does it follow from this that all the statements of your fortune teller, just as this one, are without basis or truth? The king, hearing this commitment, agreed that the woodchopper was telling the truth. The woodchopper bowed his head and praised the king, saying, Long live the king! I did this so that your fortune teller will forget his false claims and so that it becomes known that ugliness and beauty of face or clothes are not a mirror of nature. Rather, it's the ugliness or beauty of words and deeds which are the mirror of nature. At this the king cried, Bravo! To the woodchopper and granted him a worthy reward so that he would always be happy to meet the king. After that, the fortune teller, who was full of predictions, was not seen in the king's group any more.